To read Back to Reality, the best-selling novel of the Bestseller Experiment by the two Marks, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/Back to Reality.
And subscribe to this podcast to get loads of extra bonuses. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/subscribe. Let's run the show.
Philip, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm tickety-boo, thank you for asking. Now, we got in touch through our mutual friend, Ian W. Sainsbury, who will not shut up about you. He is your greatest champion out there, I think. He keeps telling me about this guy who keeps writing these epic fantasy novels which get amazing reviews and have the most amazing sales, and you've got to get him on the show. And then I started looking at some of the stats, and my jaw dropped. You've had a pretty epic ride, haven't you, Philip?
Yes.
Tell us how it all started.
I started back in 2013, and I was just consuming fantasy and science fiction books. And I think I just got to a point where I kind of felt like I knew what was coming from a lot of the books. And I felt like, you may know yourself being an author, maybe you get to a point where you think, actually, this is how I would tell that story. And so I think what I ended up doing is I was on holiday with my family, and I stayed up one night with a notepad, and I filled this notepad with an idea that I had. And when I got home, I thought, you know what, I'll just start writing it, because why not? And it took me about a year to write, because I was working as a nurse at the time. So I was just kind of slowly but surely scrapping all my hobbies and replacing it with writing. And then I got to the end and sort of, clapped myself on the back and was like, hey, you've managed to write a whole book.
Did you have any idea what to do with that first book? Were you thinking, I'm going to send it to a traditional publisher, or were you well aware of self-publishing and everything that involved?
I really had no idea about self-publishing. In my head, it was a really simple process. It was, I've written the best book that's ever been written, and I'll just contact a traditional publisher and they'll take it off my hands. That'd be lovely. How
did that work out for you?
Not great. I think I can't even count the rejections I got. But I mean, I didn't even know to begin with that you need an agent, ideally, to get hold of a publisher. So I tried going through the agency route, and that just didn't work out for me. And I met someone at work who had self-published a book, and he quite unhelpfully told me to never self-publish. Yeah, he said, it's the worst thing you can do. They take all your rights off you. You get no money. And I had no idea about it. So I took on what he said as truth and continued to try and find an agent. And so I finished the book at the back end of 2013, early 2014. And I then didn't self-publish until February 2016. So I feel like I lost quite a bit of time there, when I could have got the book out, and I held on to it, desperately trying to get hold of an agent, thinking that this was the only way to get your book out there.
Well, did you continue writing the next book in the series while you were waiting, while you were submitting?
I did, yes, because I enjoyed the once you start, you kind of get the bug and you just want to write. And for a while there as well, you tell yourself that it's okay that no one's ever going to read this book, because I enjoy writing it and that's what matters. But once you finish the book, that is not what matters at all. It feels wrong to have written a whole book and no one can get their hands on it and no one else can read it. So I wrote this. I started writing the second book, Tempest, and I probably got 40% into that book and I hit a wall writing wise. And I just couldn't seem to find the next sentence. It was that simple. And probably the only piece of writing advice that I've taken from online, because I'm terrible at reading about it, was if you get stuck, just write something else. It's not saying write another book. It's just write a paragraph, write a small story, write anything about something completely different. Keep the wheels greased. So I did. I wrote what has turned out to be the prologue of Rise of the Rager, which is like my flagship book, really. That's book one in the Echo saga, and that's kind of where things started to change for me, and I got my feet firmly planted in the fantasy genre. And So I started off writing the prologue, and I said to my wife, I'm just going to write this little prologue, and I'll finish writing Tempest, and I'll finish writing Heretic and Legacy, because I knew that was a 4-book series. I'll finish writing that. I must have been about 60% into Rise of the Ranger before I said, oh no, I didn't mean to go back and write Tempest, didn't I? And I just got carried away. But it was around about that time I discovered self-publishing, and I got Intrinsic out there, and that was when everything started.
Okay, so let's talk about your first steps. You said you found out. Where did you hear about it, and what were the first steps you took to self-publishing?
Well, like I say, that guy who gave me that really bad advice, he had planted in my head that self-publishing was a thing, and so I always knew it existed. And I think without realizing it, I had started buying self-published books as well, which is one of the really cool things about buying books on Amazon, is that they're side by side with traditionally published. You can have no idea at times that, you know, one is one and one is the other. And I think one thing, I definitely got tired of the rejections from agencies. And so I started to actually look into Amazon and KDP and how you can get your books out there. And it's all there in black and white, actually, you know, not what this guy said. You can choose your royalty rate and choose your marketing strategy, and you can choose your cover, and the whole thing is under your control. And Amazon is just this massive platform. So I think my first step was just actually joining KDP, logging in, and having a look at the format. You know, how simple was it? I'm not particularly tech savvy.
Right.
So I sort of was a bit cautious about what I was doing. But then it is very simple. It's a step-by-step process. And I think I find it really hard to write the blurb for any book. You know, my books are particularly big. They're like close to 200,000 words. And condensing that into a couple of catchy paragraphs is tricky.
I mean, I'm going to stop you there. 200,000. I mean, when you say epic fantasy, that's longer than Brandon Sanderson. I mean, this is epic fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, I go, like, you know, go big or go home situation there. And I don't mean to. Like, I don't set out to write a big book. I think page-wise, I think they come to maybe something, the average is maybe 700 pages.
Wow.
Which, I think the epic fantasy, you know, is maybe relatively standard nowadays. I think George Martin has shown people that big books can still work. Pacing is key. I'm really particular about pacing and keeping everything fresh and making sure the reader wants to turn the page.
Cool. Well, we've got a few listener questions which might touch upon some of those subjects. And just for the listeners now, I just want to run through some of the stats. So you've talked about your first books were that was the Terran cycle. That was a science fiction cycle. And then the Echo Saga, which is the epic fantasy series. And you've done, 11 books now, 7 of which are in the Echo Saga. And you've just surpassed this is astonishing. I mean, you started in 2017. We're now in 2020. You've just sold just over 300,000 copies, which is just dropping. It's just incredible. So huge congrats on that. And these are big, chunky books. You know, it took a year to write your first one, but you must really power through them now.
Yes. So, I mean, I transitioned from nurse to full-time author in March 18. And the conveyor belt was really going then. I went from 1 book a year to 2 or 3 books a year. I can typically get one from start to on the shelf 4.5 months.
Right, fantastic. Well, let's dig a little deeper. I've got some listener questions. So, first one's from Jeff White. Jeff asked, "Does Philip advocate that the best form of advertising is to write more books?" Because one of the things that's come up is you don't really do much. Well, you don't do any marketing, do you?
No, I don't think I've spent a penny on marketing ever.
Listen very carefully, Philip. You can hear people grinding their teeth as they listen to this. So, is that simple? How has that worked? How has that worked? How has that worked for you? Tell me, Philip. Tell me now.
Oh, I wish I knew. I mean, I really don't know. I can only say that, you know, I originally went out with 3 covers from a graphic designer that I could afford at the time, and as things picked up, I managed to get a hold of Chris McGrath, who is this amazing illustrator, And he gives me these fantastic covers, which I think are just so catchy, and people are drawn to them. And I do think having a great cover is that first spark that gets the reader to have a second look.
They are astonishing. And folks, we'll put a link in the show notes for this so you can check these out. The cover art for these is just amazing, really. And it does, as you said earlier, when you're on Kindle, you put these very happily next to Joe Abercrombie, Brandon, to George R. R. Martin. They all look just astonishing. You look at that and go, yeah, I'm going to give that a go, definitely. So you think that's the appeal, investing in the cover art. Did you see that make a substantial difference in your sort of rate of sales when you switched to the cover art?
Yes. I mean, so 300,000 is just for the Echo Saga. So that is just since 2017. And most of them are probably in the last 12 months. And the new covers have been out since November. And I'd say that they've probably doubled the sales, if not more so, just since the new covers came out. So
a good investment. Investment.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I've never really gone in for marketing, but I know that, if there's that whole, maybe the Amazon algorithm thing, isn't there, where, if you can, it pushes it for you. That's another great thing about self-publishing.
How many books had you published when you switched to the new artist? How many books did you have out there?
So I had the 4 from the Terran Cycle, and I had 6 from the Echo Saga.
Okay, I think maybe it could be those two things working together. So if someone discovers book 1 with this amazing cover art, they're going to buy another 5 books, aren't they? If they enjoy that series.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you could, the original 3 covers weren't terrible. I still pulling in quite a good amount of readers, but you can look at. I literally have graphs that can show you the day in which the new covers went live. You can just point at it on the graph and say that's
fantastic. What's the name of the artist again?
Chris McGrath.
Excellent. I should be dropping him a line. He's a busy boy. Next question is from Gavin Routh. Gavin says, my question relates to a comment on Philip's Goodreads profile, where he says after 5 years of writing for a hobby, he transitioned from nurse to author. I'm interested to hear at what point he decided he would make the move and what gave him the confidence to do so. So you've gone there from being on holiday, filling up a notebook, going out with self-publishing, quite kind of tentative. Quitting the day job is one of those things that, it's a big goal for a lot of authors out there. What was the tipping point for you?
I was releasing 1 book a year, and I'd got probably 2. Yeah, so I had 2 books out from the Echo Saga. Rise of the Ranger and Empire of Dirt were out and doing well. And they had surpassed my salary as a nurse. But, you're looking at a nurse who has a stable salary, you've got the income, and then you're looking at being an author, self-published, self-employed. There's that massive risk, and I have a family. So it was probably late summer 2017, so only a few months after Rise of the Ranger came out, and I was starting to really consider what I could do if I was able to get more than 1 book out a year. Because if I could make a success of 1 book a year, what could I do with 2 or 3 a year? And it was still a risk because I didn't know if I could produce that many still. I didn't know if, book 2, 3, 4 and so on would be successful. You never know if you're going to drop the ball, especially in a series. And I probably held on for 7 or 8 months, continued working past the point of when I thought I could stop now and transition and everything would be fine. I could still pay the bills and, we could live our life. And then it got to the January 18, and the best thing about self-publishing, is there's no ceiling to what you can kind of earn with it if you can get the readership. And I was waking up every morning and sort of being like, it was hard to find that motivation to go to work for 10 hours, knowing that I could be at home writing the book. I would wake up wanting to write that chapter that I had in mind for the day. And I'd have to go to work for a whole day. And by the time I came home, I was too tired to write. And eventually, I just thought, if I don't put all of myself into this, I'm never going to know if I can really make it as a success or if this is just going to be a sort of really great hobby to have on the side. So come the January, I did that thing I think that everyone kind of dreams about a bit, where you hand in your notice.
Right.
And I carried it around with me for about a week in my pocket. And my wife and I, we sat on our stairs for a week every night till about 1 a.m. talking about the pros and cons of giving up a stable job and being self-published. And we just kept landing on the fact that the books were working, people were reading them and enjoying them, and it was my dream. And if I didn't try it now, would I regret that forever? I don't know. I think I would. So I took that plunge and I handed in my notice, and I then just started writing loads.
Yes. Yeah. Don't give yourself a day off,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like that. I still remember now, I quit on the 8th of March, and then the money started to drop.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember looking at the money and being like, oh, okay, so it's made less this month than last month. And then the same happened the month after that, and the month after that, and the month after that. And then Relic of the God came out and everything changed again. And then I got a rhythm of write and release every 4 to 5 months. Once you find that nice rhythm and you're getting 2 to 3 books out a year, you're able to stay quite relevant, which I think is something self-publishers really have to keep in mind, because you don't have that backing power of the big publishers to plaster you everywhere. You have to be in your reader's face a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you engage with your readers? Do you have a regular newsletter? How do you keep in touch? I mean, I noticed you've on your Amazon page, on your Goodreads page, you put your email address and just said, drop me a line. I reply to all the emails. Is that your main way of engaging with them? Yeah,
so I do Facebook and Instagram. I have a Facebook author page, and my Instagram is just for my author stuff. And I've got a website that's going to be going live this summer, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to do some really cool stuff with that. But yeah, email. I love chatting to the fans of the books. These books are like I live and I breathe these books, and they're the books I want to read. So if people are reading these books and loving them, immediately I have something in common with all of them. We all love the same books, and we all love talking about these characters in this world. And I could talk about it all day, every day. So I typically, before I start writing in the morning, I sort of dedicate half an hour to just replying to emails. And I reply to everyone. Like I will talk to everyone that emails me.
And you do that before you start writing?
Yeah, it's a great way to get pumped for the day. Like,
okay,
you start your day, reading all these wonderful emails from people saying how much they love the books. And it's like, great, and you apply to all of them, and then you finish that, and you're like, right, you were behind, and you go, right, well, let's get the next one. Brilliant.
Puts fuel in the tank.
It does.
I've got a couple more questions from Josh Atkinson, who says, with authors like Philip, I'm always interested in the difference between the process of plotting books to that of a series. So with the Echo saga, what are we? We're 7 books into the saga. Have you got a massive arc, an idea of what's going to happen in each of these books, or are you sort of just creating new situations with each book? Are you how is that working for you?
I've never really planned too far ahead. I don't have one of those big maps on the wall that says where everyone's going and what's happening. I have sort of scenes and beats in my head, and I kind of think, oh, that's a cool idea. I'd love to write that. And I can kind of very vaguely picture how I would get there. But I always handed the story over to the characters and let them decide. I think one of the best examples of that is book 2, actually, in Empire of Dirt, where the 3 or 4 of the main characters are together in a tavern. And, they've just got through everything that's happened in the first book, and it's all a bit like, oh, my goodness. And I remember writing it, stopping and thinking, oh, what do they do next? I have no idea what they do next. Where do they go? Nothing worked out for them in the first book. So do they go here, or do they go? I have no idea what to do with them. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe that's what they talk about. maybe they don't know what they're doing next. Maybe they're lost like I am. And so I ended up just putting that dialogue between them, that they weren't sure what to do next. And there was a bit of despair there. And out of that conversation came the plot for the entire book.
Wow.
And then from that was the third one. And it just it's like a wave that just keeps rolling over you. And the characters just keep providing me with new storylines and new twists and plots. A lot of the, I won't say, but a lot of the big revelations and twists in the book, I discovered them as I arrived at them. Like a character would say what the revelation is, and I'd go, "What? I need to know more. Tell me more." And I just, just like keep writing. It's a very strange process.
I think it's funny. I blogged the other day about, because I was always a very big outliner. And it comes from screenwriting, where you have to provide an outline before you write a script, to producers and what have you. And I've recently switched away from that, and I'm doing as you're doing. I'm writing. I'm getting characters in the room, thinking, well, what's the most interesting thing that could happen next? And it doesn't always come immediately. And I'll make a note, and I'll go away and I'll do the dishes or whatever, and it'll come halfway through scrubbing a pan. Yes, dry my hands. I got to write that down, and email myself or whatever. And I'm really, really enjoying that process, because it has an energy to it that outlining and then writing as per the outline didn't quite have to it. It's like you absolutely say, you're as excited as the reader, aren't you?
Oh, yes. And it's a contrast to the way I wrote the Terran Cycle. That was a series that I planned out chapter by chapter in a couple of notepads. You can literally look through that notepad and pick a chapter out of one of the books, and it says in this paragraph what's going to happen.
Right.
But I discovered that as I arrived at that chapter writing it, I would look at the notes, and it just wasn't as exciting to write at all, because there was nothing new for me to discover, because I'd already outlined everything. Whereas I don't exactly know what's going to happen next, but don't get me wrong, I know how the series ends. I've got the epilogue in my head.
Great. Excellent. You got a finish line. Josh goes on. He says, what does Philip's editing process look like? Now, I know Josh writes short stories and writes novels as well. You're clearly writing, if we're talking 200,000 words, proper epic novels. How do you even begin to edit something like that? What is your process with that?
So I don't like using copy editors. I'm a bit strange, I think. And I know that there are some authors who would either feel that they need them or even want them to come in and do structural edits and, sort of go through everything and tell you what works and what doesn't work. But I hate that. I'm really annoying. I think it's probably perfect that I'm self-published, not traditionally published, because I'd hate for someone to come in and say that character doesn't work, that plot point doesn't work. So I'm like, it all works. Everything that I write is in this book on purpose, and it serves a purpose. So I use proofreaders, and they're always behind me by a few chapters. So because these are big books, and I try and get them, to the people as fast as possible. I don't want to write a 200,000 word book and then there's 2 months of, proofreading and editing on my side. So what I often do is I'll get 5-6 chapters in, and I'll send it to a proofreader, and then they'll send it me back. I'll make those edits from what they've sent me back, and then I'll send it to a second proofreader. And they're constantly behind me in this kind of wave that's just catching up with me. And then by the time I get to the very end, I send the whole thing to the proofreader, and they read the whole thing from scratch 3 or 4 times. And at the same time, I then go back to the very beginning and I read everything out loud and slowly if I can.
Right. That's an amazing process, because like you say, you've got this wave coming up behind you. That must really put a fire up your backside, mustn't it? You can't slow down.
Yeah, and it's great because you then, by the time I get to say I'm writing the epilogue, I know that actually there's only 10% of the book maybe that needs to be proofread, and then I can start from the beginning myself, and then I know that they're going to do a final read through of the whole thing. And it works really well, and it helps me to then get the book out in good time.
How many proofreaders do you use for one book?
Just 2.
Just 2. Okay.
I don't use any beta readers either.
No, you don't. Okay, that's fascinating. And the proofreaders you found where?
Well, so close to home. One of them is a family member who has her own proofreading company.
Nice.
And the other one is my old English teacher from school who's retired.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and he's great because obviously, he's got a whole career behind him of proofreading.
Yeah.
Because, that's what English teachers do, is they go through all your essays and your work so much. And he's brilliant. He probably knows the books more than I do now.
Superb. That is a great that is, in over 270 odd episodes, I think that's the first time we've come across a process like that. That is really, it must be kind of terrifying though. Just, you can't slow down. You got to keep going, which I guess, accounts for the how prolific you've been, which is just amazing. And you were talking earlier about pacing as well. You're very conscious of pacing. Is that, again, that thing of constantly trying to surprise yourself?
Yes. I always want to make sure that, when the pace slows down, again, it serves a purpose. It gives the reader a chance to breathe, but also those slower beats will also provide something interesting, whether it's character growth or a tidbit about something. And then the pace picks up again, and I want the reader to be carried along. And from a lot of responses I get, I know that people seem to read these books very quickly, which is great considering how big they are. So I think the pacing seems to be working.
No, absolutely. There's definitely a market. I've been looking at some of your reviews, and people love the pace. They love the characters. And then they'll say something like, I read a fantasy novel a week. So there is a voracious market out there for this, which is just astonishing. Now, I know when we were speaking earlier on, you were talking about getting rejections. You were looking for agents. I see that you have an agent now, and I believe you have a business manager as well. What sort of team have you built up around you?
So I've got I'm very lucky. I've got an option agreement for a TV series, which is brilliant.
Fantastic.
But out of that, to negotiate that, I needed an agent, because I saw the document and almost cried at how terrifying it was.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. So, I got a literary agent to actually help me with that. And she's great. It's Hardman and Swainson. So they're brilliant. They helped me sort of secure that contract. And then who else have I got? Yes. And then I've got my business manager, Amy. She's brilliant. She kind of really organizes me and keeps everything, she tells me like what's coming up, and she helps me research and get advanced stuff. And she's really, really good. I'm not sure I could do it without her. And then graphic design wise, I use Bodie Dog Design. They are brilliant, 110%. The work comes to me quick. They do all the graphics on my covers. They built the map, which is a huge thing. I know the fans love the map. And we've got some really cool stuff coming with the map, actually. I won't say, but it's some really cool stuff coming.
Excellent.
And then obviously my illustrator, Chris McGrath, I can't claim to say that he's on my team, but we have a really close working relationship. And I know that we're definitely going to be working together for a long time, because I just adore his covers.
They are amazing. Well, Philip, this is an astonishing story. It's just incredible. We love people who break the rules, and I think you've broken every single one of them, which just goes to show there's no one way of doing this. There's no single path. You have to find your own path. I'm amazed how you've discovered your own path and all this thing. What's next for you? What can you tell us? Is it more of the Echoes saga, or is there anything different on the horizon? What's next for you?
I'm hoping to get the Echoes saga finished at the end of this year, if not January. And then after that, I've definitely made some promises to the readers that I will be giving them an Asher series. So Asher is like the main character, I suppose, from the Echo saga. And he's got one of those sort of long, mysterious backgrounds. And there's about 14 years that I've kind of like established in the book that I'm going to flesh out, that people want to know about, with his years as a ranger. So I've got about 4 books planned in that series.
Fantastic. Wow.
That's maybe a year's worth of work. I don't know. We'll see where that goes from there. But then I do want to dip back into science fiction. I do have, I've been talking to Ian Sainsbury actually about it. And I've got a really good idea there for what could be a pretty epic science fiction saga as well. But I want to flesh out a bit more of Verda before I move on, I think.
Well, it sounds like you're going to be busy for some time, and we wish you all the success in the future. And this has just been fantastic. Hope to speak to you again soon.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on.
Our pleasure.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book? Quitting the day job? Becoming a best-selling author? Since 2016, we've interviewed and studied the advice of over 500 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 1 billion books. And in the Bestseller Academy, we've incorporated powerful and proven strategies for success, inspiring fiction and non-fiction authors just like you to reach new heights and write their best book ever. Ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, coaching, and the most inspiring and exclusive community of like-minded writers? Well, your bestseller dreams are just a click away. Join us today at bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Where on earth do you start to unpack that interview?
Well,
there's so much.
Yeah, and it's just his books bring in a daily income to him of over £1,000 a day. Can you imagine earning £1,000 a day? That's what he earns. It's just staggering, absolutely staggering.
Well, it's staggering beyond belief because he's not doing what we've heard a lot of indie authors do, which is bashing out a 60,000 word book, in a couple of months or even in some cases a month. He's writing, like, as you said, epic fantasy. Yeah. He's writing 200,000 word books, and it just seems to defy the odds for me. It reminds me again that ultimately, I mean, for me, the big thing that came out of this, Mark, for me, is that really, despite everything else that we hear, story is king. I mean, Philip obviously writes a brilliant novel, and that's what's selling his books, and that's what's selling more of his books and his future books, because he is a phenomenal storyteller. And so when it comes back to it, the craft is still so central to all of this, and Philip has it in spades.
Absolutely. That thing that he was talking about, write and release every 4 to 5 months, get in your reader's face. That thing of, he knows his readership, he knows what they want, because he is one of those readers. He's a passionate, fantasy reader himself. So he understands them and delivers. And boy, does he, and he gets rewarded for it too.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit about his story, because the thing that fascinated me about Philip's story is, I think a lot of people hearing that interview will have associated with a lot of the emotions that he went through from being in full-time work. I mean, being a nurse is in itself an incredibly dedicated profession. And I wonder if, the things he learned through the dedication that he has and the deadlines that he has as a nurse. I mean, you can't mess around with deadlines when you're caring for people. I wonder how much those have actually prepared him for a life as a writer.
No, it's interesting, because there's a sort of diligence there. There is a duty and a diligence and a work ethic clearly at work there, which is he's carried over. But it's and the thing is, he's such a nice guy as well. There's no boastfulness. He's very matter of fact. The vibe I got when I was speaking to him is he was kind of completely surprised by all of this, because he did, like I said, he did try. He has an agent. Yeah, he tried the traditional route, sort of, what do I do? Do I send it to a publisher and then they print it? How does it work? So there's a sort of really happy kind of naivety going into it. And now because he's just decided to do it all his own way, it's really paid off. Now, he is an outlier. I don't think we can all do this. I don't think we can all write 200,000 word fantasies, every 4 or 5 months. But there's a lesson here.
Yeah, but I would say that there's a lot to learn from the way he's doing it, and I think that's the key to success. Is when you study, when you want to emulate what someone has done in any career of any success, it often comes down to studying the things that they did and emulating those in your own way. It's not necessarily knowing that if there's no formula to writing a bestseller. We've discovered that a long time ago. Yeah. But we know that there are key principles which we talk about in the Academy, don't we, in a lot of detail. The key principles that we've discovered through having interviewed all these best-selling authors. And for me, there's so many key principles for Philip, but we need to kind of do almost a deeper dive on this. In fact, let's do that. Let's do a deeper dive on this. But before we do that and go into those principles, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the decision that Philip had to make. I loved how he explained that that week where he sat on the stairs. I could just picture them sitting on the stairs in their house, having a cup of coffee in hand, chatting up all night into the early hours about whether he should make this leap. And I know this is such a big thing for most people. And the thing that I really admire about what Philip did is, firstly, he had the courage to do it, because I know there's a lot of people in the world who may have been in his position and convinced themselves that it wasn't going to last, or that it wouldn't work if they made that jump. We've both made that jump. I made that jump actually back in the late 90s, when I had a massively successful job where I was being paid a really great salary, and I left it to start up a little tin pot web company that was earning about 500 quid a month at the time. And I went from almost six figures to 500 quid. And, I remember not sitting on the stairs, but I remember, having a discussion with my wife and saying to her, if we do this, it's a massive risk. And she even said, I'll go out and work full time for 2 years to see if I can, get you through the difficult stage. And so I really related to his journey. But what struck you about that conversation? Because you've been through that. You've kind of, you but you kind of had to make that move from full-time employment to now, full-time writer.
Well, I didn't so much jump. I was gently guided to the edge and given a little nudge.
Yeah, but you could have gone back into you could have chosen to gone back into the publishing world.
Absolutely. And I I was in a situation where I thought, this is my one opportunity to do this. And if I don't do it, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And there was a terrible risk. And I'll be honest, at the beginning, I was beginning to think I'd made a terrible mistake, and I did actually start applying for jobs again. But I got over that little bump, that little moment of self-doubt, and I'm so glad I did, because if I'd gone back into work, I wouldn't have had the time to write the film, So you've got to...
And that's the bit that people forget about. It's about the fact that and I'm not advocating here for people to just start writing their resignation letters today and quit their job, because especially right now, if you've got a stable job, absolutely essential, hold on to that. But the thing that Philip did really well is, and it's something that we can do as authors, is that he was able to still write, and he was able to start getting things going. With a lot of careers, if you're making a change and you're going, say, self-employed, you have to quit your day job in order to go and even have a chance at doing your self-employed job. But with writing, you can do what so many people do, which is working around the edges, getting up a little bit earlier, writing when you get home, writing on, as on the train when you commute. And so it's actually a really brilliant career in that regard, in that despite the fact that it's a big decision to make, you don't have to do the bungee jump and say it's all or nothing, black or white. And you do in so many professions. So I really admire the fact that Philip kind of worked hard. I mean, imagine being a nurse and writing a novel. I mean, how tired must he have been coming out? I can't even begin.
I can't. Exactly. That's just, it's just phenomenal. Just, they must be so exhausted at the end of their shift that, yeah.
But I suspect for Philip, what was going on was his sense of well-being and relief time. It was like if you spend a day in a hospital dealing with all kinds of traumas and people who are not doing well, maybe his book was an escape. Maybe he came home and he loved the idea of writing because it just meant he could go off in his own fantasy world, and that's what got him balance. So and we go back to this, it's not just about being a best-selling author, it's about the well-being that you get, the mental health benefits you get from writing, which are so huge and really not that documented currently anyway. But it's just such a brilliant interview. So let's do this. If you're interested in diving deeper with me and Mark, we're going to talk more in a special deep dive episode, and we're going to cover more about his way that he does his proofreading, which I think is phenomenal. We're going to kind of delve into why that works a bit more. What he's doing with email and why that's working, and how he's doing this in no budget and not marketing, not spending, hundreds of dollars on a Facebook ads campaign or courses of how to kind of sell your book on Amazon. he's doing this with no budget. Why? How is that happening? We're going to discuss that. And also, one thing I know we both really want to talk about, Mark, is this idea of the cover and what you call rebranding as well.
Yeah, definitely. Lots to talk about. Lots and lots
to talk about. So absolutely, get over to the website if you want to find out more about how to get access to that deep dive with me and Mark. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. If you would like to support this podcast on Patreon and help the continued running of it, you simply go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, and you can get loads of goodies, extra bonuses for helping support the show. And Mark, if people want to get in contact with us on social media?
Yes, we are on the Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter @BestsellerXP, and Instagram @BestsellerXP. And please subscribe, rate, and review on your podcatcher that you're listening to now. All of those little stars that you give us, they make us a lot more visible and help us to keep carrying on. And a big thank you, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD.
And if you're new to this podcast or you're working your way through season 1, you know that we spent the first year of this podcast writing a book to make it a bestseller. And if you haven't heard of that book or you haven't read that book, it's called Back to Reality. Pop along to Amazon, check out all the 5-star reviews. It's got over 120, I think now, Mark, isn't it? So pop over and have a read of that book. It's a lot of fun, and it gives you a bit more context into the journey we went through. It's almost like a study guide, isn't it, for the first year of the podcast?
And there's a great audio book as well. If you're on Audible, check out the audio. It's just wonderful.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, have an amazing time, Mark. And thank you to all of our patrons that have supported this show and are supporting it. Thank you to all of our Academy members. And thank you to you for listening to the show. And we look forward to chatting with you again next week in a rerun and in 2 weeks for our new episode. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Are you ready to transform your writing and your life? Join the 200-word challenge today. In just 5 days, learn to develop a lifelong writing habit with over 2 hours of free expert coaching and the encouragement of a vibrant community. This program has already changed the lives of thousands of writers like you. No matter how busy you are, this challenge will show you that with just 200 words a day, you can significantly boost your creativity, productivity, mental health, and confidence, propelling you towards the end. For the first time, receive comprehensive coaching and step-by-step guidance, all for free. Transform your writing habit and start your journey to become the writer you've always aspired to be. What are you waiting for? Sign up for free now at 200wordchallenge.com and make writing a part of your daily life for life.